Hello everyone and welcome back to another video. In today's video we are talking about the Super Bowl of Smash Ultimate Genesis X. This is one of the most stacked events we've ever had in the game, and it's going to be an absolute banger. Our top 16 seeds are going to be Yaura, DeBuzz, Osimo, and Budace in 16th, Riddles, T, MKLeo, and Zomba in 9th. In 7th you're going to have Shootone and Light. 5th is Ken and Glutiny. 4th is Tweek. 3rd is Spargo. 2nd is Miya, and projected to win the entire thing is Sonics. And before we get into the top 64, there's a bunch of potential upsets I think could happen, and I'm just going to go through them rapid fire style. The first one is going to be Beast Mode Paul versus Akka, and this is likely going to be the Hero Ditto, and Akka definitely knows the English menu at this point, at least I assume he does, and Dittos are always coin flips. I have no clue. Maybe Beast Mode Paul goes Sephiroth, but I can't imagine so, and I'm just really excited to see who wins that matchup. Then you're going to have Cosmos versus DeBuzz, and historically Cosmos has been very good in this matchup, but he hasn't had the best form recently, though he did look really good at Umabora, so if he's playing like he was at that event, there's a very real chance that he upsets DeBuzz there. Then you're going to have MKLeo versus Jackal and Neo versus Ouch. I think both of the Wolf players can take this set. Wolf is such a polarizing character because when you're playing good and you hit your reads, you are a serious threat, but if not, then obviously you're not going to be winning the sets, but I definitely think that both these guys can make the upset and maybe get a Wolf Ditto in the top 64. That would be exciting. Then you're going to have Tweek versus Goblin. Goblin is up 3-0 on Tweek. Now, I would still expect Tweek to win, but it seems like Goblin just kind of has his number, so we're gonna have to wait and see. And I also think Tarek has a real possibility versus Ona just because Greninja definitely has the tools versus Steve. Then you're gonna have Yaura versus Crep Soleil, and Crep Soleil is coming from Europe. That is the region of the Samus players. He's definitely gonna be very good at the matchup, and there's a possibility for the upset right there. Next up is going to be Zomba versus Void, and Void is very good versus Rob. She just does well versus the character, and like Cosmos, if he was playing as he was at Umabora, I do think there's a very real possibility that he can win that set. And of all of the upsets that I'm going to mention here, the one I'm the most confident in is going to be Tilde over Kononobe. He looked incredible at Let's Make Big Moves 2024, and Falco does very well into Fox. Tilde's beaten Light before, and he's a Fox player himself, so I think that's going to be a big upset for him. Then you're going to have Gact versus Luis, and Palutena Ness is just a really bad matchup for Ness, and I believe they played before and it did go into Luis's favor, so I think it's going to go into his favor once again. Then you're going to have Esam versus Base Mage. He should win that one. It's Jigglypuff versus Pikachu, and then you're going to have Lima versus Esam, and this is another upset that I think could happen. I think Bayonetta struggles massively versus Pika, and you can't get some of the edge guards that you would get versus most characters, but I still think that Esam is going to be able to pull it off. And then finally you're going to have Apollo Kage and Web JP. If Web JP is good at the Snake matchup, it is going to be very tough for Apollo Kage, because when Sheik players have control of grenades, it is a really tough time. But if he messes up once or twice, AK is just going to explode him. So I don't really know who's going to win this one, but I wanted to mention it because it's definitely going to be a banger. So into the top 64, our first matchup is going to be Sonics versus Beast Mode Paul, and Hero does not do super well versus Sonic. He has some spells, and Side B's really good versus him, but you don't have infinite uses of Side B, and if you're not rolling correctly, it's a really tough time, and you often don't have time to fully read the menu, so I would expect Sonics to take that one. Then you're going to have DeBuzz or Zachary versus Sonics, and I'm not going to lie, I have no idea how Zachary is going to do this tournament. I don't know who he's playing. I imagine if he gets to Sonics, it's going to be probably the Rob because he does really well versus Ken there. And I think Zachary can get into the top 8 winner side, but I'm just going to go with the cop-out answer of saying he could beat all these players, but I'm not going to pick him to get in the top 8 because I really just don't know. So our first person in the winner's quarters is going to be Sonics. And on the other side, I actually think that Karama is going to be the player that ends up getting to him. He has an amazing record versus Shuton. I believe it's 3-1 or something like that in his favor. That he's going to get either MKLeo or Neo. And if he gets Neo, then he's probably going to lose that one because Mario versus Korn is really tough. But I would expect MKLeo to actually beat Neo. And Karama does beat MKLeo in their last encounter. And Leo has been struggling with Mario lately. I don't know who he's going to play. I don't imagine it's the Joker, even though Joker has been his best character recently. And I honestly just think Mario and Kurama in general is a tricky matchup for Leo, though of course he has won in the past. It's not impossible, but I'm going to say that Kurama makes the run, and I do expect Sonic to get into the top 8 winner side, regardless of who he's meeting. Neo is a scary one because of Korn. Leo's probably his scariest opponent just because historically he's been pretty good, and Joker does fairly good versus Sonic, but his form and his character have just been so excellent that he's probably going to top 8. Our next top seed is going to be Tweek, and his first opponent is going to be Onin, which is a tricky one. Tweek's biggest flaw as a player, in my opinion, at least just matchup-wise, is probably going to be the Steve matchup, and that is a tough matchup to not be super good at. I think Diddy Kong has the tools to win that matchup. He has ways to destroy the blocks, but it's definitely not a favored matchup for him. I'd say it would be slightly in Steve's favor, but I imagine that Tweek has been grinding on this matchup to make sure that he improves, and he did lose to Onan on their last encounter. I believe it was at Crown, but I'm going to give Tweek the benefit of the doubt, especially considering that he ended up winning Luminosity Makes Big Moves. He's coming into this event pretty hot, so I'm going to say that he ends up taking that set, and then you're going to have Yaura or Shattuck. Now, if it's Shattuck, Tweek is probably going to win that one. He's got a very good record there. But if it's Yaura, I'm not as confident. He has a 1-2 record versus Siski. And like I said earlier on, Steve is probably his worst matchup, and Samus might be his second worst matchup. I'm not going to lie to you. This is a very bad bracket for Tweek. And if you look on the other side, he's probably going to have Glutiny. But we're skipping a couple steps there because you're going to have Glutiny versus Cola as our first matchup right there. And Cola can definitely beat Glutiny. They've only played twice before. It's going to be 1-1 overall, and it's been quite some time. Cola is going to be another massive X factor coming into this event, but if Cola does end up beating Glutiny, then he's going to fight the winner of Zomba, Kananabe, Tilde, or Void. It could be all four of those players. If it's Zomba, though, which is probably the most likely output, Cola is very favored in that head-to-head. He won recently at Luminosity Makes Moves Miami, so then he would fight Tweek, and I would expect Tweek to win that one. I would also expect Tweek to beat Kananabe in the run back. I would expect him to beat Tilde, considering that he won that set at Luminosity Makes Big Moves. He's got a very good record versus Void, so pretty much there's a handful of players that if Tweek gets, he should win, but if he gets either Zomba or Glutiny, which are the two most likely players, he's probably not going to top 8 winner side. Editing proof block here. Tweek Siski is actually only a 1-1 record, and Siski did win their last encounter. I also think that Samus just does very well versus Diddy Kong, so all the things that I say still kind of stand. I don't think this is a super great draw for Tweek, but it's not as bad as I made it seem. I realized I forgot to say who's actually going to top 8 through this part of the bracket, and it's probably going to be between Glutiny and Zomba. Tweek just has too many variables in his bracket, and there is a possibility that his bracket goes well. He gets Shattuck, he gets probably Cola or Void, Tilde, those could all work out for him, but Glutiny and Zomba, they aren't really relying on that as much, and I'm ultimately going to go with Glutiny just because he's got a better chance versus Cola, and if Cola beats Glutiny, then I think he's probably going to beat Zomba as well, so Gluto's going to be my pick to top 8 winner side. Our next top seed is going to be Miya, and his first opponent is likely going to be Rathlow, and if he does end up getting upset, it's going to be to Rathlow in my opinion, because Palutena does extremely well versus Game & Watch, and there's even a possibility that Miya whips out the Steve, but Rathlow, very good versus Steve. He's beaten players like Big Chungus before, and you're also going to have Palutena having some really good tools versus Steve. I'd call that matchup at least even, so there's a very real chance that Rathlow makes this upset. The only real downside he has here is going to be, one, it's Miya, arguably the best player in the world, and two, there's just not a lot of very good Game & Watch players in Japan, so he might not be as preferred for the matchup as he needs to be, but I definitely think there is a possibility. Then you're going to have Miya versus either Mudace or Meister, assuming that he does beat Rathlow. And if he gets past Rathlow, I think he's going to top 8 to the winner's side. And I do think that Mudace is going to beat Meister. He's won in their last 2 encounters, even though the matchup is very hard. But I don't think that Mudace is going to beat Miya. Miya was just very dominant in their last encounter. And as I already said, the matchup is just extremely difficult. Then you're going to have Miya versus either Light, Riddles, Umeki, or Gakt. And I think of all of these players, Light is probably the one that's most likely to make it through. Gakt is a bit of a tricky opponent. I think Ness has some really good tools versus Fox, but that's if he ends up leading Luis, and I don't know if that's necessarily going to happen. And Light Riddles is definitely a coin toss, assuming that Umeki doesn't beat Riddles as well, because that is a possibility, but I would expect Riddles to win that one. So let's say we do get Light Riddles, it's a coin toss, but regardless of who wins that coin toss, I do think that Miya comes out on top. Riddles would be favored more than Light in my opinion, just because it is such a bad matchup for Fox, and Riddles has taken a set off Miya before. I'm not saying Kazuya does well versus Game Watch, but you only got to hit him 3 times to secure the stock, and even though the disadvantage is really bad, if you manage to get out of that disadvantage a single time, then you're Kazuya with Rage, and that can be extremely scary. So there is a possibility that Miya can end up going to the loser side. If it happens, it's probably going to be to Rathlow, maybe Riddles or Light, maybe even Mudace, but he's probably just going to get top 8 to the winner's side. And our final top seed is going to be Spargo. His first opponent is likely going to be Bloom Forever. And this is really just the Bayonetta gauntlet for Spargo, because I do think that Lima is going to be awesome. It's a fairly difficult matchup for Ryu, and Lima's form has just been incredible. So if Spargo is good at the matchup, he should be fine, but it can be a little bit tricky. For all 3 of his characters, which are going to be Cloud, Aegis, and Korn, Korn is going to have the best recovery, and Cloud and Aegis, pretty much every single time they go off stage, they are going to die, but Spargo in the neutral, as well as Cloud in the neutral, is really scary, so I think he should beat Bloom and Lima. He's never played against Bloom. Well, they played once, but it was 4 years ago, and Bloom was playing, like, Pokemon Trainer, and Spargo was on, like, the Inkling or something, so that doesn't really clout. And then versus Lima, they ended up playing at Coinbox IRL, and you do have Spargo winning that in a Game 5 set. So I think these are going to be really tough sets for Spargo, but I'm going to give him the benefit of the doubt in both of them just because Bayo is a super common character. You should know the matchup at this point, and Spargo did beat Lima before. He's shown proficiency in it, so he should be fine. Then you're going to have Spargo versus likely Ken, Apollo Kage, T, or SkyJ, and I think the most likely result here is going to be Ken. But I think every single one of these players can end up making it to Spargo. Apollo Kage Spargo at Watch the Throne had an incredibly competitive set. Game 5, one of the closest sets I've ever seen, so Apollo Kage could definitely win that one. Ken beat Spargo in their last counter. T and Spargo haven't played in quite some time, but T is just such an X factor when he's playing well. And SkyJ has beaten Spargo before at Collision. He ended up beating him twice. So it's a really tricky bracket for Spargo, in my opinion. But if he can get over the Bayonetta players, I think he should be slightly favored versus all these players, but there's not a matchup where he's just going to sweep. And as per usual, we're not doing the loser side just because it is way too fickle. Pretty much every single one of these matchups just aren't going to happen. So I've taken my 30 players that are most likely to top 8, and I've given them the percentages. You've got Sonic, Gluto, Miya, and Spargo. Fairly self-explanatory. Those are my winner side picks. Then you have Tweek, MK, Leo, T, and Light. And these are the guys that I think are going to top 8 through the loser side. I think Light is going to get through on this segment. I think that MK Leo is going to get through on this segment. I think that T is going to get through on this segment, though it could be Karama. And I think that Tweek is going to get through on this segment. Then you're going to have Ken, Shutone, Zomba, Riddles, Dabuz, Yaura, Mudes, and Osimo. And I think these 4 guys especially could be even in like a 60% tier to get into the top 8 because their form has just been incredible. And Dabuz, Yaura, Mudes, and Osimo, if they have pop-up events, they all can definitely get in there. I mean, last Genesis was the time where we saw Mudes have his best run ever, so maybe Genesis Mute comes to play. Then you have Cola, Onin, and Zachary, and I have them in this in-between tier because it really does just depend on their form, and we haven't seen a ton from them, so it's really tough to gauge their form. But if they're playing at their best, they should be somewhere in this 50% tier, maybe even the 75% tier. But if they're not maybe at their peak, they'd be somewhere in the 25% tier, which has Apollo Kage, Lima, Shattuck, Meister, Kananabe, Neo, Tilde, Karama, Raffalo, Bloom Forever, and Beast Mode Paul. I think every single one of these players has a very real shot to get into the top 8, and it's crazy to say because I picked 30 people, but this event is just so competitive. There's so much top talent that is very close right now. It's been like that for a while in Smash Ultimate, and the level of play is only adding more and more players to the top. It's so exciting to see. And we have arrived at the top 8. We're just going to be doing the projected seeding as per usual because I want to highlight all the players that were good enough to get top 8 seed at a major event like this. And there are a couple players that I think definitely have arguments for top 8 seeds, like MK Leo and Zomba, for example, maybe over Shutone. But I do agree that overall Shutone has been a little bit better recently. And even though MK Leo was phenomenal at LMBM, I don't want to base everything off that one performance, even though it is the most recent performance. So we're just going to be doing the top 8 projected, and our winner side matchups are going to be Sonics versus Tweek as our first one. And this is a massive coin flip. They've only played twice recently, but it was at literally the last major event, LMBM. And you do have Tweek taking both of those sets, both extremely competitive. The first one, Game 5. Second one was a 3-0, but all those games could have gone into Sonic's favor. And it's just really tough for me to decide. I am going to be going with my head here instead of my heart and picking Sonics. I definitely think there is a chance that Tweek wins it, though. It's a massive coin flip matchup, but Sonic's adaptation from set to set is just so incredible. He'll find a player that he loses against and then just grind that character, learn all of the flow charts off stage. And Diddy Kong's definitely a tricky one to edgeguard, but that doesn't mean I don't think Sonic will probably figure it out, so I'm going to say that he wins that one. Luckily, our next matchup, not as difficult. It's going to be Spargo versus Miya, and Spargo is the heavy favorite going into this one. He has never dropped a set to Miya, and Cloud does extremely well versus Game Watch, and it's not like Miya can just go Steve. That's literally the worst person in the entire world to go Steve into. And I imagine Miya has also been grinding versus Cloud. And if he is going to win the set, it's going to be because he's flow-charted Cloud off stage like Sonic has. That is why he has so much success versus Spargo, because the edge guarding is very important versus him. This guy's not making too many mistakes on stage, so you have to make the most of the opportunity. And every single time he goes off stage, you have to kill him. And Game Watch definitely can do that, but Miya's kind of known for his advantage state and his ledge trapping. He doesn't edge guard as much unless it's like a really good matchup for the edge guarding, like Min, for example, and in those matchups, he's an absolute monster off stage. So if he can replicate that versus Spargo, he can definitely take the set. But based off what I've seen, Spargo's experience versus the two characters and just how good that guy is, he should win this one. In the loser side, you're going to have Shutone versus Glutiny as our first matchup, and I predicted Glutiny to get top 8 through the winner's side earlier on, but I still think that if he does face up against Shutone, he's going to lose this matchup. It is a 9-1 record in Shutone's favor, and that's really all I have to say. The only saving grace for Gluto is going to be that they haven't played in quite some time, and I'm sure he's cooked something up versus the Olimar or the Aegis. I'm not super sure which character Shutone's going to play, but it's probably going to be Olimar just because Europe as a whole has a very big problem versus that character, but maybe Glutiny will finally overcome it in this set. Who knows, but probably not. Then you're going to have Light versus Ken, and Ken does win their last encounter at Watch the Throne, but Light is still going to be my heavy favorite going into the set. I think he played terribly in that set. He clearly just was not in it, and he's one of the best players in the entire world versus Sonics because of how quick he is. He's on the best character in the entire game versus Sonics, being Fox. The only character in the game still that I think has an argument of actually having a winning matchup versus him, so I would be very shocked if Light ended up losing this one, even though Ken won their previous encounter. So in the loser side, you're going to have Shootone versus Miya and Light versus Tweek. And for Shootone, Miya is going to be the heavy favorite going into that set. Shootone has taken a couple sets off Miya in the past, and Aegis does do fairly well versus Game & Watch, but it's not well enough. Miya just seems to have Shootone's number. He's just so dominant in their recent encounters, and obviously not impossible. Shootone's a very good player. He can adapt and overcome, but based off the recent sets, you have to favor Shootone or rather Miya on this one. And then you're going to have Tweek versus Light, and I have no idea how this set's going to go. I never do, because it's one of the most coin flippy matchups in all of Smash Ultimate, and I'm gonna go with Light here just because we're at Genesis. It's the Genesis curse for Tweek, and Light always does good at Genesis. You know, he gets 5th one year, then he gets 4th, then he gets 3rd, so it seems like he's projected to get 2nd place this year, and because this is such a coin flippy matchup, I'm not gonna let Tweek stop the streak. In the winner side, you're going to have Sonics versus Spargo. Loser side is Light versus Miya. Now, for Sonic Spargo, another extremely coin-flipping matchup, and it is going to come down to the Corrin. Is the Corrin ready for Sonics? And to be honest, I don't think it's quite there yet. I would love to be surprised, and he doesn't necessarily need the Corrin. The Cloud and the Aegis have shown in the past that they can pull it off, but I think it's getting to the point where Sonics is just killing Spargo every single time that he goes off stage, and while that still will happen a lot with Corrin, it's not as easy versus that character just because her recovery is significantly better, but I just don't think the Corrin is quite there yet. Again, I would love to be pleasantly surprised, but I think Sonics is going to take that set, and in the loser side, you got Light versus Miya, and we kind of talked about this earlier on. It is just a very difficult matchup for Fox. It's so hard for him to get out of the disadvantage. He dies super early. The edge guarding, the lead trapping is so miserable. It's really hard for him to keep up his advantage state because of a big threat that he is. He doesn't have any of the shield pressure that he has versus other characters because up B exists. It's just such a nightmare. Now, Light in the past has shown he can beat Meister. He can deal with the best Game Watch players in the world. And if he were to beat Miya, I would favor him more in the second encounter just because his adaptation is so good and he's maybe able to learn from mistakes that he made in the first set, but I would still expect Miya to take it. So our top 3 is going to be the top 3 seeds, Spargo, Miya in the loser side, and Sonic's winner side grand finals. 3 of the 4 horsemen, and the only reason it's not 4 of the 4 horsemen in the top 4 is because one of them is not in attendance. These guys just seem to be leagues ahead of everyone right now, and there are a handful of players in this top 8 alone that I think can beat some of these guys. I think Tweek has a decent chance versus definitely Spargo, definitely Sonics, maybe not as much so Miya, but I think he can pull it off. I think Light has a very good chance for Sonics and Spargo. Glutiny has a chance versus these guys. There's a bunch of players out of the top 8 that can beat them, but going off of consistency, going off the head-to-heads, they just seem to be the best right now. And in the losers finals, you get that rematch of Miya versus Spargo, and as I already established, it is going to be super heavy in Spargo's favor. This first set is going to be very telling of how this second set goes, because I think it's going to be super apparent. Is Miya going to be able to beat Spargo off the first set, whether he actually just straight up beats him, or just how good his edge guarding is, how good his advantage is, how is he playing around the neutral with really important moves like Cloud Backer, like Cloud Forwarder, are his parry timings on point? And if they are, he's got a real chance in this set, but I don't know if they will be because I haven't seen the set. So just going to go with history here and bet that Spargo wins it. Then the grand finals is the rematch of Sonics versus Spargo, and it's the exact same reasoning that I used earlier on. I just don't think the Corrin is quite ready yet, especially to win 2 sets in a row. Nobody has managed to beat Sonics twice in a row, at least in the grand finals before, and I don't think that it's going to happen again. I could see Spargo taking a set, but just not both of them. And our big winner of Genesis is going to be the first seed in Sonics. And with that, I thank you all for watching. I hope you enjoyed. The sport has been absolutely unreal as of late. There are so many talented players showing up at this event, so if I didn't mention your favorite player, got something wrong, or if you just want to say hi, leave a comment down below. Be sure to sub while you're down there, and I will see you all in the next one. Bye-bye!